Hello everyone, I'm Thibault from RSU by PriceLabs. Thank you for joining us. Um, let you all stream in, get into the room. Um, as you know, today we'll be talking about recent Airbnb changes. Um, and I have two great speakers, Heather and François, we'll introduce them later, who will be able to talk to help you think through what these changes are, whether these changes are big or not for your business, whether you should be worried, whether it's just business as usual, what actions you take, if any, and how do you keep abreast with all these changes in general. So our goal here is to bring you clarity. It's really about clarity. What are the changes? Which ones are big? If there are some actions, which ones to have to take? There's already 68 of you, so welcome. So just because I'm curious, I hope you guys can see me. I hope so. Things working, right? Correct. Um, um, I'm curious. Just let us know in the chat where you are, because that can help us as well as usual. Personalize a bit the chat. Sorry, today I'm a bit mumbly. Um, so let us know in the chat where are you based, and if you can, how many properties you have. Again, really enables us to maybe talk about specific cases. Some changes, for example, don't affect Spain as in other countries. So it's interesting. Let us know in the chat where you're based. Um, and I'm going to get started formally now because we are 1 minute after time. That's what we do. Oh, there we go. As usual, I'm struggling with my slides, but we'll get through it. All right. So a lot of changes. Good news, this is being recorded, meaning that you can focus on the discussion. We'll try again to bring clarity and have as much information as possible. Oh, a quick one. So rental scale up, which I created some time ago, has become RSU, which is rental scale up, by PriceLabs. The idea is really to make sure that it's clear and defined that everything we do is PriceLabs. But it's just the same voice, right? It's just the same voice. And we will make sure that people understand that whether it's like market data from PriceLabs or insights about the industry from ISU by PriceLabs, same voice, same people. Um, so indeed, because as you know, I founded PriceLabs, but also I'm the head of product marketing at PriceLabs. So I got two hats. That's why you see this. So RSU by PriceLabs, what we do, we talk about the industry through articles. We have a free weekly newsletter, YouTube video, short, a podcast as well. There's Yuvika, Snigda, and myself on this. All right, so what we are going to be talking about today. So bear with me as I try to explain the flow. We'll be covering these 6 topics. First, I'll give a quick overview of each topic in this one slide. Then I will introduce our speakers. And then we get back, I will ask a couple of questions, general questions about the topic overall. And then we get back to each topic. For each topic, I have one slide. So you have an overview of what the change is. So don't worry, each topic will come with one slide, and then we'll discuss them, right? So hopefully, again, we want to bring you clarity. And for this, I had to create slides for once. So we'll be talking about Airbnb, of course, but the idea is not to single out Airbnb, right? Here we'll probably also be talking about changes on Vrbo as well, or even Booking.com. The idea is to understand as well why big platforms are doing this, right? So it's kind of thinking we have, and obviously the idea of this webinar came about because there has been a lot of noise around these changes, right? And some people are saying, "Wow, it's terrible." So other people are saying it's not. It's just business as usual. So I really want to bring clarity on this. And obviously, Airbnb is a name people like to. It's a brand, and whatever Airbnb does, people talk about it. And as well, if you write articles or videos, it's clickbaity as well to say, "Ooh, bad, 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 Airbnb has done this or that." But as professionals, we want to take a step back, right, and talk about this. So we'll have one, the off-platform communication ban. So what it means, like we'll detail this, but the idea is like we've heard noise, right? We've heard that maybe you can't send links anymore. Maybe you can't get users to use some apps anymore. You use yourself to get your guests to download and use. True, not true. We'll cover this. Second one, The strict cancellation policy, you may know, is going away on October 1st, but you can take action and be grandfathered. We'll talk about that. Another one, Airbnb, as you may know, launched Airbnb services. As you may know, these are services like, a chef, massage. They can be booked by a guest and take place at one of your properties without you being notified or getting a cut, by the way. So we'll talk about that, whether you can opt out. We'll talk about security deposit. One is there actually something new around security deposit and what's really happening around this. It's really important. Can you still ask for a security deposit? We'll talk, speaking of money, collecting money, fees, upsells. Overall topic here because I want to make sure it's very clear. Sometimes I have doubts as well. And then the last one is age requirements. So is it true now that you have no way of specifying, I only want people, over 21, 25? Is it true that you must accept everybody above 18? So we'll talk about these topics. And to do that, again, as I said, we'll cover each topic calmly. I'll go slower and have a slide for each. But I will stop the slides now and let François Gouelo, who's the co-founder and CEO of Enso Connect, introduce himself, and Heather Fillmore, she's the co-founder and CEO of StayLuxe Properties. And this is where I stop. And François, do you want to start
Yeah,
introducing yourself?
I love being on a webinar with you, Thibault, because you pronounce my name so perfectly. So thank you. My name is François. I'm one of the co-founders of Enso Connect, and we are a guest experience platform for vacation rental operators. We've been in business now for a couple of years, with over 50,000 units on our platform, and different integrations across multiple PMSs. What we do really is three main things: focus on three value propositions, increase the revenue per guest with upsells, save time in your day-to-day operations with AI and a unified messaging platform, and drive more five-star bookings by giving you access to some of that data for you to understand who your guests are and better your guest experience. So that's a bit about me.
Thank you, François. Heather, how about you?
Hi, so I'm Heather Fillmore, formerly known as Heather Brown. I've been in the industry for about 7 years now, so most people know me by Heather Brown, but yes, Heather Fillmore, which is my maiden name now. I'm the co-founder of StayLuxe Properties, which is a luxury vacation home property management company in Park City, Utah, specifically. That we are intentionally small, a boutique high standard management company. We're pretty strategic about the owners and properties that we will bring onto our portfolio. My goal from the very beginning is to be no bigger than 40 and to be a property management company that owners will be on a waiting list to be managed by us. That's my goal. That's the kind of service and standard that I want to have in place. And so I'm intrigued when I saw the poll come up about the number of properties that each person is managing, because I think that's going to play a lot into the conversation that we have today. The fact that there is such a wide range of from mom and pop owning one all the way to these really enterprise companies. And so I fall somewhere in the smaller part of that with only about 20 properties right now. But that's intriguing to me to see kind of where we're coming in on that poll.
Well, let's start with that, Heather. Before we dive into each and every topic, first, why do you think there's been so much noise about these specific changes? And second question here is that do you think it's the way this is received is different whether you're a host or a bigger vacation rental company?
Yeah, that's a great question. As far as the first question of why do you think it's created so much noise, my personal opinion on this is that what I've seen happen in our industry a lot is a lack of education. I think that's actually foundational to a lot of the issues that we have in our industry is lack of education. And I think that what happens when we are not proactive about educating ourselves, we start to panic. If you're more proactive about education, you don't really have as much need to panic because you're more solution focused. And so there is something to be said for putting yourself in that mindset of I want to be, solution focused versus, panicked. And as far as, okay, remind me the second question, how it affects different sizes. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, exactly. How different
Yeah,
is it? How do I receive it differently if I'm a host, as we said, or a larger company?
right. And I do think that is a big piece of the puzzle here is that the mom and pop that is going to list on Airbnb only, at the end of the day, they have to follow those rules. They have to just kind of take it as it comes. And many of those, when you look at different social media forums right now, you find that those smaller, mom and pop that are not quote professional managers are not nearly as panicked, I would say, because to them, they're just kind of like, well, I'm rolling with the punches because this is my only gig. I don't really have any other choice. So it's just, all right, well, Airbnb, you're telling me that I have to do this. Okay, I guess I'm just going to acquiesce to whatever you require of me. Whereas a professionals, even a smaller professional management company like myself, we look at it from through a different lens where we have owners that we have a fiduciary duty to, things like that we need to educate regularly. And so it's a little more pressing for us when we see these changes to these policies. It's important to us that we communicate and educate based on those new policies. It's not as much of a situation where we just can say, we just acquiesce and do whatever you tell us to do. So I think that's where the size matters in this case, to use a terrible term.
Also, what do you think of that? Because I like what Heather said about this, right? It is education, it is knowledge, it's received differently as well. From your side, obviously at Enso Connect, you bring the viewpoint of being a third party that has connections in all kind of ways with Airbnb. So again, why do you think this change is creating some noise? Do you think it was more than usual, for example? And again, how do you think it plays out whether you have one property or way more?
So I think to answer the first part, I think there's different aspects of the changes that have freaked out a lot of people. And to take what Heather was saying is a lack of education, reading it as almost a shocking first time news. I think there's also been a few players out there that are leveraging some of these policy changes to create that clickbait anxiety of why they should sign up to that software, this system, or how they're compliant, not compliant. So it's creating a lot of noise where there shouldn't necessarily be some noise in certain cases. And, when I think about the off-platform communication data policies, the changes are kind of the same. Like, don't try to get direct bookings from your Airbnb guests. And these are things we've known since day one. I think there's also just a broader tightening of Airbnb on some of these rules. And it doesn't apply to everyone, and it was applied globally. And so people are kind of realizing, wait, how does this fit in my business model? Because my business model is centered around certain rules or agreements with owners and so on, where I need some of these things to be done. And there was a bit of a lack of communication. It was kind of just announced out there from Airbnb. So it creates a lot of buzz. It creates a lot of questions. In terms of the size of property managers, and I think, if you think about Airbnb, they're a marketplace. They have two customers. They have the host as a customer and they have the guest as a customer. And as much as property managers might think that they're siding more with guests, sorry, they need to strike a balance to a certain extent. Now, whether that balance is too much to the guest, we could debate that. But I think for larger property managers, we'll see a bit less of an effect because they have so much inventory. It's key for Airbnb to hold on to that inventory. But we will see a bigger impact, or I think we'll see a bigger impact for smaller property managers because simply the listing count or the booking volume might not be as important. So, your size does matter in this context, I think, as much as they'll treat every customer the same. But there's these policy changes that they are trying to adapt globally. So understanding how this fits in your particular business is really key. So excited to be on this webinar today.
Thibault, I would love to I think he's I think he's muted, but I'd love to address somebody that on the chat that was saying that I'm just blowing smoke and that this makes a difference to smaller property managers or individual property owners as well. And apologize to Mary Ellen. That was definitely not what I was trying to indicate here. I understand that this can be damaging and can affect everyone. I guess what my thought was that it affects everyone differently is what I was trying to get across. And so I apologize, Mary Ellen, if you felt that you are not being seen in this conversation. We definitely are seeing you.
Yeah, exactly. And I know Heather is such a pro host person that I think one of the points we wanted to maybe link to this is that if you're a property manager, sometimes you also can connect directly with some people at Airbnb and ask questions and get clarity. But François said some stuff sometimes not very clear. So we try to bring clarity, but sometimes you're lucky enough that you can actually call or send an email to Airbnb, if you're a small host, there's little chance you can have that reach. So it's something to me also it plays out differently, this level of information. That's also probably, I think, agreeing with Heather on this, it's also different in this way, right? It's not, we're not saying it's not impacting, but the way you can get information or react to it is going to be different because sometimes you actually like inside information in a way, or a bit more information. All right, let's go to the first topic. Let's go to the first topic, which is, bear with me, the slides as usual. That's one slide. All right. So I'm sure you guys have a lot to say about it. Let me say what I think is happening, and probably gonna say a few things are wrong or not, but let's do that. So a couple of months back, a lot of noise on social media while Airbnb now is preventing us from doing direct bookings. That was the word. And what it actually meant, I was like, huh? I looked at the terms, and actually what Airbnb is saying is like, when you're talking to guests, basically we don't want you to tell them to book directly with you. But as François said, it's kind of been always the case, but let's just say it's maybe clearer. But that also created unclarity because in the sense that they Airbnb started saying you can't send certain types of links. You can't, for example, force people to download apps. If you're going to provide information or some services through apps, people should always have access to it through a different way or something where they don't have to create an account and give you basically their email address. I'm really making it super short, but that's the idea. So if you don't, of course, don't have the people's email address, you can't remarket. So if you can't remarket, you can't do direct bookings later. I think that was the thinking behind the Upro, right? Obviously, in terms of, but Airbnb from the get-go said, for example, if you're in Spain and you do need passport and the rest, it's okay to use these services that allow you to get the passport from the guest and send it over to local police. So there, I think that's what happened. But I'm pretty sure we have here two experts who can walk us through what the thing it is. I would start with François because, as François, you know the topic pretty well.
100%. Yeah. So we're one of Airbnb's direct and official partners. So the advantage here is we've gotten to have conversations with them to better understand it. And as Thibault mentioned, there's one thing that hasn't changed is they don't want direct bookings. It breaks their business model for you to promote your website and get a direct booking from Airbnb's platform. Now, maybe the wording and how they've changed that or the wording has changed a bit, but the message is the same. If a guest comes on Airbnb, it is an Airbnb guest, and we want you to fulfill that via Airbnb. Now, here's the thing about third-party apps and links and so on. Many of us have been a bit cheeky about this and saying, well, I'm not promoting any sort of direct booking. I'm just providing a link to a guidebook where there so happens to be a link in the guidebook's link that tells them about my direct booking and so on. So this is what they're trying to protect. They're trying to find a way to create structure from a policy perspective for people to not abuse it. You might not be asking directly on the message, book directly with me, but you might be using other ways to get that direct booking somehow. And again, you've got a policy team, you've got a partnership team, you've got account managers. I mean, this is a large public company. They have to work between different organizations to find something that works for the thousands, if not, hundreds of thousands of hosts in North America, like the ones in South America and Europe and so on. So it's a balance between policy and also protecting the business model to a certain extent. One thing I'll note is requiring guests to go through a third-party app download where they have to download another application. That's completely removing them from the Airbnb experience. And quite frankly, guests don't want to download another app. So if you're going down that path, I wouldn't even bother. In terms of links, this is a bit of a sensitive subject because we have guidebooks, we have verification tools, we have upsell tools, we have check-in portals, and this is something we do at Enso Connect. And they don't have at Airbnb yet the technology to figure out which ones we should white label and meaning we should accept their links and which ones we shouldn't. So what happens when you send your check-in instructions? I just checked into a property in Turkey a couple of weeks ago, and they sent me a Google Drive with all of the pictures to check in. Is that link banned? Well, I don't know. They'd have to check the content of what's in that link. And again, they don't have that technology to figure that out. So they've put in place a policy, and I think it's about creating a good guest experience. And I say this not from being a guest experience platform, but if your guests are complaining about the process they have to go through, you will be flagged, and they may leverage some of these policy items to favor the guest. But if you're creating a seamless guest experience and you're not getting any complaints, it's business as usual. So there's one thing I would say that I'm personally a bit frustrated is as an official partner, I would hope that we get a different recognition on our links that we send from a random phishing link that might come out of, some random country. That is something, I'm sure Airbnb is looking into. But again, the essence of that topic is don't try to drive direct bookings from a guest that's trying to book on Airbnb. And that has not changed. The wording may have changed a bit, but the overall essence of what they're trying to achieve here is the same.
And that's the same on Vrbo and Booking.com, obviously,
Absolutely.
right? And also, I want to echo something else. I've worked in the past for Booking.com, and it's the same thing. When you try to drive a topic with a large company like this, there are so many departments you need to talk to, and you realize they don't maybe don't to among it, they don't talk among each other as often as they should sometimes. So it does bring sometimes unclarity on some topics. But Heather, what's your viewpoint on this new communication policy, let's say?
Yeah, and obviously I bring a different perspective as a host versus a vendor. And I loved everything that Francois had to say, simply because the fact of the matter is, if you choose to list your property on Airbnb, Expedia, Vrbo, Travelocity, Booking.com, I don't care what you name the OTA, you have made a choice, and by making that choice, you accept the consequences. That's being an adult. I'm sorry to say it that bluntly, but that's being an adult. And having said that, I think that we then just we go back into that solution mindset, right? Okay, I'm accepting that I'm using this tool, and I very much look at it as being a tool, as from a property manager slash host standpoint. Airbnb, I don't work for Airbnb. I don't work for Brian Chesky. This is a tool that I have tapped into. So I'm going to follow the rules. I am just by my nature a rule follower anyway. So I'm going to follow the rules, but I'm also going to look for some alternative solutions on how can I start driving some direct bookings, because I really would prefer direct bookings. And to Francois's point, there are ways of doing that that are not just you blatantly going to a guest and saying, hey, listen, you're going to get a better deal if you book with me
Yeah.
direct. The reality of it is that the idea of this tool, I think that those of us that might have panicked about this idea or are worried, I guess I should say, about this concept, or the reintroduction of this concept, as Francois said, it's always been there, is to look at it from the standpoint of, thank you, Airbnb, thank you, Vrbo, thank you, Booking.com, for bringing a guest to my property. Once that guest is in my property, it's now my responsibility to provide them with a level of service and attention that captures them as a long-term guest. So once they are in a StayLuxe property and they are sitting and looking through our very beautiful guest guidebook, full color, full bleed, all the information of all the places they want to go and eat and places they want to visit and all of these things, with a QR code sitting there that says, hey, I mean, literally our guest guidebook, our physical guest guidebook has a catalog of all of our properties. That's the back end of our guest guidebook, is a catalog of all of our properties with QR codes that take them directly to our booking website. And they can sit there and look through that catalog and say, my experience with StayLuxe has been really amazing. I'm going to look at some of these other properties that they might have. You know what? I've stayed here this time, but I think I might want to stay at that property next time. I'm not doing anything wrong. Airbnb is not going to come after me for having this full color, full bleed guest guidebook that has all this information, that has QR codes for them to book another one of our properties the next time they come out to Park City. So that's what I'm talking about, is that solution-minded thought of going from this idea. The reality of it is that the vast majority of us are not enterprise companies. So the vast majority of us, whether we're one single property up to probably the range of maybe 100 properties, maybe a little more than that, we need the market share that Airbnb provides. We need that visibility for the first booking. And that's what I would say. And Vrbo talks about this as well. Vrbo has an understanding that that they have an understanding and an expectation that those of us who are doing this professionally are going to attempt to get people to a book with us directly once somebody has come in and stayed with us. They don't want that to happen. They would prefer for guests to continue to use their platform because that's why they're in business. But they have an understanding that that's what most professionals are going to do, is going to provide a level of service that encourages their guests to come back and book directly the second time. So for me, that's where that fear starts to move into a solution. I'm not afraid of it because if I'm doing my job well enough, if my team is doing their job well enough, they're going to want to book with me direct anyway the next time.
And that's on communication. Again, thank you both for taking the time explaining this because I know it's the first one that started exploding. And then we had way more topics coming that also creating a lot of noise. And indeed, and I really like what you both saying because if you're seeing the recording, can't see that, but people in the comments are really approving what's being said here. So it's really pretty good. So I'm going quickly to the second topic now, and I want to make sure I'm showing this. I know this question for slides. Again, this is being recorded, so you will have access to the slides. We just talked about off-platform communication policy. Let's go to second topic. Strict cancellation.
Real quick,
Go ahead. Yeah.
can we discuss before moving to the next one? Can we also, just because I was just reviewing really quickly in the chat and people are having questions about like IDs and that sort of thing as well. So
I think
one
we're
thing,
addressing that on point 4, no? With security
are we
deposits
addressing
or
it on point 4?
Security deposit is coming next. Yeah, 4.
Well, so I'm talking about like the ID checks, like being able to
Mm,
ask somebody for their ID as part of that off-platform communication and data
right.
policy. One of the things that I want to touch on really, really quickly there is that there are ways for you to actually legally through Airbnb ask for an ID. And I think that that's important that people on the panel understand. So for me personally, the way that I am able to do that is that I have a right to insure my properties. We all have rights and should, let's be honest, we should be insuring our properties against damage. And so the company that I use, the third party platform that I use for insurance requires, as part of their coverage of our properties, requires that we have ID on hand. So that's an important piece that we need to talk about before moving on, is that yes, you are allowed to acquire and require IDs before a guest checks into your property. If you have something like that in place, it can't just be arbitrary and just say, hey, I'm just an individual host. I want to see your ID before you come in. That Airbnb is not going to allow. But if you have a program in place that does require having ID before being given access to the property, you're allowed to do that. Now, here's the caveat. Hear me on this. You must disclose that in your listing description. You cannot just arbitrarily require that after somebody has booked your property and then spring that on them. Hey, by the way, we need your ID. You must disclose it clearly in your listing description, or else it will not be upheld. So
100%.
yeah. So now we can move to the next one.
Yeah, exactly. It's a fair point. And I like it what you just talked about as well, right? We just try and bring clarity and also bring you like things you can actually do and that actually match Airbnb's text. Right? Airbnb does say you have to disclose things in your listing, right? So it's a very good point. So as always, we're trying to bring clarity is also understanding the rules, and we'll talk about this later. So the strict cancellation policy, this one, it can be short and sweet in a way because used to be if you're as just old as I am, you had super strict 60, super strict 30 days, and the only thing you had left, you could be grandfathered. I think I was grandfathered for this. And you had strict. Strict is going away. If you have listing in the strict, you have probably have seen something in the interface of Airbnb telling you it's going away on October 1st, but you can be grandfathered, right? If you don't do anything, your listing will be downgraded in a way to the firm policy. Knowing that now on top of this now, it's not actually the firm policy as you used to have because people still now have a 24-hour window to cancel if they made a mistake. So it's firm, not so firm. So I wanted to quickly talk about that again. This one is probably don't need too much discussion. It's going away. Maybe any kind of things. I think Heather, you try to grandfather your properties. Any tip here?
Yeah, so this is an interesting situation, obviously. And from what I saw in the poll, it's the thing that's bothering people or worrying people the most is this cancellation policy change. Okay. So the first thing that I will say is that I always try to start in, some sort of a positive note. I actually find the 24-hour cancellation policy a huge win. In my opinion, I'm like, listen, if you've made a mistake, don't block my calendar for more than 24 hours. Get out of here. is kind of how I think. So that's actually, I'm actually kind of excited about the 24-hour policy because that does help me as a property manager and host as well, regardless of what that booking window was. If they don't want to stay, leave quickly so that my dates will open up again and offer me that opportunity of rebooking. As far as like the process of opting out of this was interesting for me because when I first received the email saying that I could opt out, I immediately clicked the link, went in, opted out, clicked on select all. Okay, it pops up a little notification window that says, hey, you've opted out on all of your properties. You're good to go. But in listening to some other people in the industry, wiser people than myself in the industry, I came across some information that says, as a second layer, you should call and confirm that has actually gone through and that's actually true. So when I did that, that's where it became really interesting is that I was having conversations. I actually was on the phone for an hour. I was having conversations with different ambassadors from Airbnb, and none of them really could give me any solid answer. They're just kind of like, well, I'm going to have to transfer you to this other team, and I'm going to have to transfer you to this other team. And I became more and more frustrated and as much as possible, tried to stay calm with this ambassadors, but said to them, this is bothersome to me as a host and as a consumer that you have not sent me an email that confirms that I'm now opted out. All I'm getting is a little screen that pops up that says you're opted out. Well, but there's no evidence. There's no written evidence anywhere that I'm opted out. And what's more challenging is that if you go in to the link, I went in a second time and it allowed me to opt out again. And it made me think to myself, oh, I was very uncertain. And I thought, well, wait a minute, I already opted out. Why is this even giving me the option of opting out if I've already opted out and saw the screen pop up? So that's where it becomes a little bit challenging. And so I did finally, after being on the phone with Airbnb for an hour, I did finally have a case number and message from Airbnb support that says, we want to confirm you have opted out of these cancellation policy changes and you've also opted out of services, because that was the question I was asking as well. So we'll talk about services later, but I wanted to make sure that I had that in writing, that I can go back to that in case something comes up in the future. I can say, well, hold on, I have a case number directly from you, Airbnb, that states that I have actually opted out of this. So what I'm saying is there are options for opting out of this, but it is going to be a little bit of a challenge. Unless you are just comfortable, I will say this, I'll caveat, if you're comfortable with just checking a box and feeling secure with that, great. Maybe I just have trust issues, but for me, I want to be able to have something that's in writing, that I can keep in a folder somewhere. And that's where it could be a little bit challenging, is getting that written confirmation.
Yeah. A couple of things just to add to this from the comments here. So normally, if your properties are in the strict, you should see in the interface, in the hosting dashboard, you should see a message on top of your hosting dashboard telling you to take action. So you may have received an email about it, but the real thing is go into the hosting dashboard. You should see a little window that tells you take action, and then everything Heather said will be there. Like you can see like a pop-up that will load and will take you to doing this. It takes just 2 clicks.
And I'll say this too, Francois, as far as from my perspective, from a property manager standpoint, and this may not affect those who have individual properties that they manage on their own, but from the property manager standpoint, one of the biggest challenges going forward for me is that I've opted out on my active listings. This is an important aspect of this policy. My currently active listings are the only ones that are opted out. If I onboard an owner in September of this year, I do not have the choice of rolling that owner into what all the rest of my owners have right now as a cancellation policy. So it becomes a little bit of a challenge from a host and property manager perspective if you are managing homes on behalf of someone else, that I now have to educate new owners. By the way, you fall under this new cancellation policy, and you need to tell me, are you okay with that? Do you want to list your property on Airbnb based on that requirement? So that's a big part of this too, is that we need to understand that this is something that affects your opting out only affects your currently active listings.
Really good point. I would just add, and this is more just high level. I don't have this confirmed by Airbnb or anything, but there's some data out there that signals certain things. first of all, airlines already have 24-hour cancellation policies. It's a legal thing. You can book a flight, you can cancel it 12 hours later, no penalty. The a lot of the OTAs that are focused on hotels also have that policy already in place,
Right.
booking.com. And if you think about what's happening in the market overall from a booking windows perspective, those booking windows are shrinking and shrinking significantly. In May of this year, 24% last minute bookings versus 16% in May of 2023. So there's a bit of that tension that's happening, and probably from, politics and the economy and whatever. I'm not going to go down that path, which is making people a bit more cautious of how they're spending their money and when they're traveling. And so I think you have to think back at what are the KPIs that probably Airbnb is measuring, is also like how many bookings are they getting, right? And so if bookings are happening very last minute for a seasonal type of industry, you want to find ways to combat that and give confidence to the guests to be able to book and feel more flexible, that they're not going to be locked in if something changes. Now, I understand that that's at the detriment of potentially some property managers who had a revenue management strategy, or even a property management strategy around their cancellation policies. But again, you chose to list on Airbnb. They have also a business to run, and so they need to find a way to balance the thousands, if not millions, of properties that are on their platform. So that would be my 2 cents on this one. But
Let's
I
put
don't,
my
yeah,
my hat on the here. Let's make sure we go through all the topics.
yes,
Uh,
yes, yes.
because the three of us, we can talk hours, so the people love this. I know that people like it as well. So, but I think there are topics that each of you can really cover well coming up. So make sure that, and indeed, that's what we said. Indeed, firm is the default one nowadays. Uh, for this, boom, there we go. Third one. So. Airbnb launched a new category called services. As I said, it could be a chef, a massage. A guest can book it. It will take place at your property. You're not notified if you're the owner or the manager. Of course, Airbnb says that people who do this, which is true, they're very vetted, right? It's not like anyone, any random person. They vet them, so and they must have their own insurance. But some people have been nervous. What happens if the chef puts the kitchen fire and it's like the whole house burns down? Are you really covered? Or something happens. I know some kind of massage behavior can get into like a no-go zone. I don't know. Um, you have a choice. You can opt out. We talked about opting out of the change for strict insurance policy, but the thing is, the experience is a bit different. And maybe Heather, you want to quickly go through what it's like to get, because you can choose not to have these services take place at your listing. Airbnb lets you get out of this. You can opt out. By default, you are opted in. By default, you are in. So how do you get out, Heather?
Yeah, so this is the same thing, only different as the cancellation policy. There is nowhere inside of Airbnb currently, to my knowledge, where you can go to some sort of page inside of Airbnb and say, hey, listen, I'd like to opt out of services. It just exists. Okay. So the only way that you can opt out is either by phone call or by messaging an Airbnb ambassador through the chat. And I've done both, and again have that confirmation on my case number that says, hey, you've opted out of these. Now, the biggest challenge that I think that I've found with this is that what if they add, so they actually listed which ones, like specifically, you've opted out of the Airbnb services that include blah, blah, blah. There's like 9. Okay. But my challenge in my mind is, okay, but what if you add another one and that's not listed on that original list? I'm like, what does that look like for me? But for me, I think that the other part of this is just to your point, I would reiterate what you're saying is that I think that what most property managers and hosts are feeling is twofold. One is I don't have any control anymore. This is my home. Why should I not have control over who comes into my home? That's one of them. And the second one is for those of us who are already offering concierge services and are partnering with our local people, supporting local businesses, we feel like that's being taken out of our hands. But what I will say is, I congratulate, on the same hand, I congratulate Airbnb for considering that the movement forward is that people want experiences. They want to enjoy more than just the 4 walls and the beds. And
100%.
so we have to, as property managers and hosts, we have to balance those feelings And again, it just goes back to this, where do I find a solution for this? And for me, the solution was I'm going to contact Airbnb directly. I'm going to say, hey, listen, I already have a program in place. I need to opt out of these services. That's the best way forward for me.
I couldn't agree more with what Heather said, and I'll add to this is like this is a signal for the industry, and for all of you who are listening to this that if a giant like Airbnb is getting into experiences, you can too. And if anything, you have a lot more power when it comes to experiences than Airbnb does because who does the guest message when they have recommendations? They don't go to Airbnb support to ask them for recommendations about the local area. They go to you. So as the local partner, what are those best services and so on. So there's the policy component of how to opt out and so on. And certainly Airbnb's created a bit of friction by making it enforced across all and then harder to opt out. I think probably there's more of the policy comes out after the product comes out and they forgot the API piece to allow the easy opt out component. And I hope that they'll find a better way to do that. But overall, I think this is actually a really positive light on the industry that shows that what Airbnb's created and always has mentioned is creating this local experience, and they're diving deeper in that. They're reinforcing that message by saying, here are some services. Now, I've been on their experience page, and I got to say, I'm pretty underwhelmed. I mean, Toronto, which is a quite a major city, there's one photographer, like one chef, and like a nail salon or something like that, and all three are definitely not necessarily things I'd be looking for when traveling to Toronto. So I think there's a lot of room for improvement. But instead of just waiting on Airbnb to do that and not necessarily share a piece of that pie, start figuring out how you can be a part of those upsell strategies. So I'll leave it at that. But
Let's
go
talk
ahead,
about.
Thibault.
Well, I'm going to the next topics. We talk
Yeah,
about share of pie,
I
upsell
know.
strategy, making money. Perfect segues. Thanks a lot. And it's again, we did it. I think it's delivering a lot of things stuff here. So let's just go through this. And thank you all for replying to the polls because it's really giving good idea of whether you worried of this. Um, so next one is indeed money. Security deposits. Again, in my understanding, basically, I remember back 10 years ago looking at Airbnb, and you could mention in your listing, could mention a safety deposit, amount security deposit, but they would not take it already, right? There's no way they never touched it because they already wanted you to use their lovely, we all love it, their resolution center, right? I think we all love it as hosts. Because that's the goal to them. Safety deposit is money. That's friction. It's not a good experience to them again, right? And it's even more money somebody has to shell out to stay at your place before you can. So it's not making your place affordable. So to them, they really wanted to get rid of it. That's why they came up with Resolution Center. So in a way, it's kind of not kind of new. But maybe I think, François, you have a good view on this. What is actually new here in terms of a security deposit?
So first off, let's understand how safety deposits work. There's holds and there's charging, right? You can charge a card and say, I will pay you back later, or you can place a hold on a card and then it automatically or not automatically, removes the hold. When you charge a card, there are fees involved, right? So the concept of Airbnb going down the path of building a safety deposit function, charging the guest a safety deposit, refunding, there's a transaction fee there that's going to happen. It's not worth it. When you do a hold, there's a lot more complexity because we're looking at 3DS, which is the ability to verify the credit card and making sure the hold is actually real and not fake. So there's some technology complexity there that Airbnb just hasn't done yet. I'd factor also, and this is going to tie into point number 5 around fees, is that there are some new rules out there, specifically the trade regulation rule on unfair or deceptive fees, 16 CFR Part 464. Yes, I'm reading that. I didn't remember this by heart. But basically, the common name is FTC junk fees. Or anti-drip pricing rule. And this is applied to so many businesses in North America. I'm talking Ticketmaster for your concert tickets, just like Airbnb and any other major platform. And that is just fair pricing. They want to, and it ties a bit to the fees, we're going to talk about in a second, but they want to make sure that what you see when you're going to pay is actually the correct amount and that you're not going to be faced with all these additional fees and safety deposits and so on. And that is a rule that they're having to follow. They implemented some of these changes in April and May. So you've got that. Now you've also got to factor the fact that hotels, well, they've been collecting safety deposits since forever. So maybe I'm running a boutique hotel on Airbnb. You also have to factor maybe some insurance components, like Heather had mentioned, where there's some certain requirements. Or just, go to Europe and tell an owner in France that you're going to manage his property and not collect the safety deposit. I can guarantee you they will not be your client. Like, it's just not going to happen. So once again, we're dealing with placing policy, trying to adapt to all of these exceptions and all of these rules. But you can't have a 50-page legal document on safety deposits. People aren't going to read it. I'm sure we will, but it just makes things too complicated and we'll miss the edge cases. So here's the solution. Safety deposits are authorized. You can collect a safety deposit, but you need to run this by your reps. You need to make sure you provide a very clear listing description that you will be collecting a safety deposit. In addition to this, there's a specific endpoint. This is not to get too technical, but basically some of us as vendors have, as official Airbnb partners, the ability to post on the total price at the end before the reservation kicks in that there will be a safety deposit for X amount. And this is something that not all software vendors have. Approved Airbnb vendors who have that direct connection have that capability, and that is how you solve that problem. I'm not saying use my software or use this software. It's just more, you want to make sure if you're going to collect a safety deposit that you're using an approved partner, and that you are putting it on your listing description, and that you are, following certain rules, whether it's because of HOA, insurance, and so on. So it's a tricky concept, and it's a tricky solution as well. But you can collect safety deposits in certain cases. You just have to be very clear about it. And again, you want to follow that FTC junk fee rule as well. If you're just collecting the safety deposit because you want to, and why not? Then pick another OTA.
Thanks, François. Heather, any view on this? We have two more topics behind.
Yeah. So the people like François are not going to like this answer that I have. But
No, go for
François,
it.
we're friends, and we've talked about this before, actually, he and I. My solution as a property manager, and something that I have preached for the 7 years that I've been in this industry, collect your own damage waiver and just figure it out. Like I don't know how to tell these people this often enough and help them understand. But high level, here's the deal. Let's say that, so my damage waiver is aggregated into the rent on Airbnb. Either that, or I use that space as community fee for my damage waiver. It's either or. I'm going to collect a damage waiver. It's a mandatory fee. It's in my listing description. Hey, as part of your reservation, we have collected a damage waiver. It's going to cover you for up to $1,500 worth of unintentional, unavoidable damage that you report during your stay, not after, right? So it has very specific parameters around it. It's a required fee that I charge, that I tell people up front that it's going to be charged. It's aggregated in, or it's used as a community fee. And here's what a lot of people are missing is that, let's say that I end up with $10,000 worth of damage waiver income at the end of the year. I'm going to be honest with you, I may be spending $1,000, $2,000 of that on actual damages. The rest of it goes into my business. So that's my answer to this whole thing. I have never charged a security deposit. I have only charged mandatory damage waivers that are appropriate to the quality of that home. So some of them are as low as like $79, but for a 5-bedroom estate home, it might be $200. And I've never had, well, I take that back. I've had, in the thousands of guests that I've hosted, I've maybe had 6 people that have come back and said, what is this damage waiver? Do I really have to pay for this? Everyone else is like, hey, I'm getting covered for $1,500 worth of unavoidable, unintentional damage. I'm willing to pay for that. That's great.
Heather, I'm so not upset with that. If anything, I completely agree with the approach of damage waivers. And I'm always preaching. I think I just launched a video today, or later today, somebody's launching a video where I'm talking about damage waivers. So could not agree more. And a great segue to the next topic
Exactly.
of fees, if anything.
Exactly, because you may be thinking, ooh, let me do this so it's clean. You're thinking, hey, wait a minute. Heather is charging a fee that is not a cleaning fee, pet resort fee, and stuff that's in the existing fees that Airbnb has. But actually, look at the rules. The rules are there, right? You can also include it in a nightly price and disclose it. So that's in the rules, right? So let's just quickly on this one. Has anything changed on collecting money and fees? So again, we know that Airbnb wants to be transparent, wants to make sure that all the fees are listed where they should be, or if they're not on the list, you have to charge it a nightly price. So it will be reflected when people think about booking your place from the beginning because it's in a nightly rate. So in that sense, it is transparent because that's what they want. If I'm evaluating two places where I want to stay, I will look at the nightly rate, and then this will be baked into the fee, right? So be to the nightly price. I mean, um,
And
so see, and I will shut up here. Anything you want to add on this? Because I'm pretty sure you have good thing about how do you collect money? How do you do this, François?
so it's the example that you just showed on the screen there, it said, accept city tax and so on. I go back to Airbnb and the platform they've built and the technology they have, right? They've said we want fair pricing. We want to show the full amount before the guest goes through the purchases. They've added these concepts of safety deposits for certain vendors where you can post it and it'll be in gray at the bottom. And they have different concepts. They've introduced pet fees and a few others. But we're dealing with a global business. There are other exceptions. There's a city tax. There's a registration tax. There's maybe, there's so many exceptions based on different countries. Maybe there's an HOA fee that needs to be paid for. Who knows, right? They don't have that terminology all broken down where they can display it. So there are exceptions when it is legally mandatory to collect certain fees to go through off platform to collect some payments. Now, to go back to what Heather was mentioning about damage waivers, and I think this one is quite interesting, is you can absolutely bake it into your overall nightly costs. That makes perfect sense. I mean, that means you're getting 100% conversion on your damage waiver because every guest is paying one. My sort of contradiction to it would be, okay, well, you're also increasing your overall nightly rate in with regards to the guests. So there's an alternative, and that is to provide guests with optionality, to let them choose between a safety deposit or a damage waiver. You will see a 60 to 80% conversion rate on damage waiver anyways. And it goes back to that revenue mark that Heather was saying, which is you're making more money than the damages that are being caused anyways. And if there is a damage, most likely that damage is slightly higher than your safety deposit amount anyways. And so your safety deposit isn't going to fully cover it. So this is where we play a bit on the ambiguous side, which is, if you remember, you are allowed to collect payments off platform for things like upsells, which means it's optional. The guest has a choice. If they want to purchase an early check-in, they can. If they want to get the tour, the activity, the boat ride, etc., they can, but it's optional. When it comes to fees, something that is mandatory, hey, you want to check into my property? Well, you got to pay this fee. You got to pay this extra money. Here's a link. That's not authorized unless it's something that's more legal, like a city tax and so on. And then to find that sort of middle ground is providing optionality in a compliant way, looking back at safety deposits, to give the guest a choice, again, optionality, between a safety deposit or a damage waiver, as long as you've mentioned it in your listing description. So it's all about clarity. It's all about guest experience. If your guests complain and are like, this is such a horrific experience, they're making me jump hoops, payments, this, that, Airbnb will find the key pieces that are breaching the policy. And if it's not Airbnb that's doing this because they have a whole new AI component that can read messages, the guests will, because they have access to ChatGPT and they can probably just say, based on Airbnb's policy, what is the host doing wrong? Because I'd like a refund here. It's annoying, right? So there's that factor as well. Sorry, I ramble. Thibault.
No, it's good.
I think exactly to what Francois's point was. I just posted on LinkedIn last night about this. The biggest issue that we have with this particular policy and with many other policies on Airbnb is two things: ambiguous language and staff at Airbnb not being educated. Those are the two things we're going to run into as the biggest challenges with this new policy. Is that I actually posted on my LinkedIn, there are two policies in play here that appear to be contradictory in how we charge additional fees. One of them is this new policy, and the other one is a policy from before. And I'm not going to be able to quote the policy numbers, but if you look at my LinkedIn post from last night, you'll be able to see this. And the reality that it comes down to, when in doubt, just opt for charging through Airbnb, because at the end of the day, what the policy is actually stating is that anything is directly related to the booking on Airbnb. Mm-hmm. If that's early check-in, if that's taxes, if that's a damage waiver, if that's I don't care what that is, but if it is directly related to their booking within Airbnb, it must be charged through Airbnb. However, there's another policy that Airbnb has that says, hey, for any bookings that's happening, or any charges that are happening like in your house, like let's say it's grocery delivery, let's say it's a massage, whatever it is, you're responsible for that. We don't want to be responsible for that. We don't want to be the merchant of record for that. That's on you because it has to do with something that somebody in the chat talked about. It all boils down to the merchant of record piece.
Yes.
And I think that moves us into the next topic.
Yeah, exactly. Because I actually wanted you to say that merchant of record piece. Somebody was asking, is Airbnb? So you can confirm Airbnb is. And also something I want to, you mentioned that when we were preparing this, believe it or not, we did prepare. I hope you guys can feel it. And you're the ones, I think, Heather, who brought it up. And I quickly want to bring to the screen and say this. That apparently, and I think it was back in May. So let me go back to some point. It's always been like you could say, I don't want people below, below a certain age, for example. And even in my property, I could say I don't want people under 12 because the property is by a cliff and I don't want kids to fall, right? And it kind of looks like, and even during COVID, Airbnb had like even its own policies preventing people under, I don't know, 21, 25. François, I'm not even sure you could book.
I couldn't go. Yeah, I couldn't book half the Airbnbs that were out there. It was annoying. You
Exactly.
know, it's so annoying. And you know what? Fake IDs work on the validation of Airbnb profile. I'm
Hey,
just saying that. I'm
let's
not
be
Absolutely, they
saying
careful.
do.
Let's be
so.
careful. So, but I went to say, so there we could, Airbnb did discriminate based on age, but now the age discrimination policy of Airbnb has changed and kind of looks like you can't refuse anybody based on age provided they 18 plus. So, true, not true. How do you get around this, Heather?
Yeah, so this was an interesting one to me, especially because I kind of discovered it by accident. And I know that there are lots of people out there that kind of knew when this came out, but for me, it was more of like an accidental discovery. And I thought one of the things that I want to bring up about this that I think is going to that will parlay into our next topic as well as far as like educating yourself was this piece that I'm in a vacation rental roundtable, and as I presented this to the people in my roundtable, they're like, what do you mean? Where did you find this information? How are you getting this information? And so it goes back to that education piece. But here's how I look at this is number one, we're in a luxury vacation rental market. Like these homes are $5 million plus. We don't need a group of 18-year-olds coming in here and having a party and causing all kinds of damage to a multi-million dollar home, right? And let's be honest, even if your home is $100,000, you also don't want a group of 18-year-olds coming in and ruining your home. That's what it boils down to. And this home belongs to the homeowner, and they should have the ability to say, I don't want this. I don't want this to happen. So the current rule that is in place, if you read it carefully about the age discrimination, is what they've written into this rule in the policy on Airbnb is that unless you have documentation from local authorities, like your municipality that says, hey, vacation rentals in this city do not allow anyone under whatever age, or you have documentation from an HOA where that property sits that also says something similar. We do not allow people to book under a certain age. Then you have the right to discriminate against age if you have those two pieces of documentation in place. Well, for
What
me,
about insurance?
I'm sorry.
What about insurance?
That is
Because I
where I
know
was
you.
going to get to.
Oh,
So
sorry,
for
sorry, 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 sorry.
me, no, I'm glad you brought that up because that's exactly where I was going. So for me, my solution was obviously I talked to all the people about HOA, all my properties that are in HOAs. Hey, maybe we should make this rule. And they're all like, oh yeah, we didn't know about this. Maybe we should. But then I have some properties that are not in an HOA. And Park City as a municipality doesn't have any rules. So I'm like, great, now I'm stuck. How do I fix this problem? Again, you put in the solution hat on, you're trying to figure out what to do. I went directly to the insurance piece. Again, I have the right to insure my property. And if my insurance company requires that the age of the booker, now obviously we get into the weeds here of like, well, everybody else could be 18 and the person that's booking is 25, right? You get into the weeds there a little bit. But if the person who is booking is 25 or older, and that's what my insurance requires, then I have the right to discriminate against on age, if that makes sense. And I hate to even use the word discriminate, but I have the
Yeah,
right to require that the booker be 25
It
or
is
older.
actually the page name on Airbnb,
Yeah.
discrimination based on age. So these are the
Yeah.
right words. Yeah. So we made it through all the points. Congrats to back all of us. Um, I would quickly want to say, so Heather, how do you know all this? You just talked about this. How do you, as I said, right, all these changes happen, and we just spend an hour going over them and trying sometimes to understand what was clear, not clear, and also the interactions, right? There's whether the new policy may interact with something else, or may contradict something else, as you pointed out. How do you keep abreast? What's your trick?
So there's two things that I would say to this that I think are important. Number one, make sure that the email address you have associated with your OTA accounts, and again, we're not talking about just Airbnb. There are things that are happening in Vrbo's side as well, right? But make sure that the email account that is associated with your OTA accounts is something that's being checked. Do not put it as some like info at blah, 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 and nobody ever checks that email address. Because if you do that, you are going to miss all this. So assign an email address that you know is going to be checked by a person who is responsible in your company. In my case, because I only have 3 people on my staff, that person is me. I'm the one that's taking responsibility for that. So that's key. Make sure you update that email address so that you are getting those emails and you can discover them when they come through. And I think that the second one is that you spend time going a little bit deeper dive into these things. And I even do things like I will pull certain policies in and say, and throw them into AI, chat GPT, and say, can you break this down in layman's terms? But here's the thing. I don't always trust chat GPT, and neither should you, because we now have the phenomenon of AI hallucination, right? Where sometimes AI will come back and say something, and then you're going back and reading and say, well, hold on, you're saying this, but if I'm not mistaken, this sentence contradicts what you just told me. And then when you roll that back into ChatGPT, he's like, "Oh, thanks for bringing that to my attention. You're right. That was something that I missed before." So don't entirely depend on AI to do this, but it is a great tool for starting to condense the information in a way that is more tangible and more palatable, if that makes sense. So those are the things that I would say. And like I said, then layer on top of that things like this webinar, things like what Thibault does with a big portion of his time, which is educating, because he's spending the time. If you don't have the time to read through these policies and understand them, then let Thibault do it. And then just listen to his advice and his suggestions, because he's taking that time to educate you. But you have to unlock the door and open it and say, "Hey, Thibault, come on in, educate me." He can't just dump it in your lap. You got to show up.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. And my tip as well. Here I actually use Google has something called Notebook LM from Google. It does not hallucinate. All it does, it actually can compare the content you give it, like before and after two documents. But on the other hand, that's all it can do. So just a tip is that's just as you, I'm like, it could be overwhelming to read a whole contract, but get some help and read the things again, but you have to read for yourself. Same thing for what you see on social media. As usual, is great, but go beyond the clickbaity title. See for yourself what Airbnb is saying. And again, and get maybe AI help if you need to see what's changing, but see for yourself. And as Heather said, have somebody in your company, in your team, a user owner, be the official owner of that task. You are the person, whenever there's something rolled out from Airbnb, from the discover@airbnb.com email address that some of you may know, somebody is the owner of this and has to inform the rest of the company, a short briefing or short summary. That's what's happening. François, what's your opinion on this? And then we can wrap up.
I mean, just first of all, thank you so much to everyone who's been in this webinar, who's been listening. I've been looking at some of the questions and some of the chats here, so it's really impressive to see first the diversity of property managers and hosts that we have here, and couldn't agree more with everything Heather mentioned. Like, stay educated, stay on top. RSU is a phenomenal resource to learn more about what's happening in our industry, such as these policy changes, so you don't have to go and dissect all of them. But just keep in mind that you are running your own business and this is your vacation rental business. So figure out what works best for you. And, Airbnb is a key piece of this industry, no doubt. So speak to your reps there, try to understand how you can fit some of these rules. But yeah, I mean, I love this industry. I can't wait to see how it's going to continue to evolve over the next couple of years. Just stay aware of all of these policy changes because they will directly impact you.
So my apologies, we could not cover each and every question in the Q&A because we have time and I really make sure that the speakers can also go and do their things. I will look at the questions though and make sure that we reply to them in a takeaway article you have. Again, this is being recorded. You'll receive a link, an email with a link to this. But if in the audience you want to contact Heather or François to know more about what they do, have their opinion, anything, what's the best way, François, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Shoot me an email. I know my name is a bit complicated to write. It's Francois, not Swaah, as I've seen at Starbucks, even though it's pronounced like that. Francois. First name dot last name at enzoconnect.com. I see your team just shared my email and my LinkedIn. So reach out anytime. I'm always happy to share more insights on this topic or any other for that matter. Thank you so much.
Thank you, François, for your time. Heather, how about you?
Okay, ask me the question again because I'm typing an answer to somebody real quick.
Oh, sorry. How can people reach out to you?
Yeah, you can reach me on LinkedIn. I mean, you can email me directly at heather@stayluxe.properties. There's no .com at the end. It's just .properties. That's always tricky. But yeah, and it's spelled traditionally HEATHER, and StayLuxe is with an E at the end, STAYLUXE. Properties, plural. I'm always happy to answer any questions. I'm actually kind of an open book, and I've kind of created that reputation for myself in the industry. I literally share my owner agreements, my damage waivers. Like, I don't care. Like, I'm just trying to lift the tide here. If you have questions, I'm here to answer in whatever way I can. I
Thank
don't know
you.
everything, but I do know a few.
And thank you, Heather. Thank you, François, for your time. Snida Yuvika for helping prepare as usual. RSU by PriceLabs. Used to be Rental Scale Up. RSU by PriceLabs website. So follow us. We have short videos, long form video, newsletter, blog articles. And the only thing more I could do is come to your door, explain to you what's happening. But please, please, please have somebody on your company own the information, the updates. It's very important. Thank you all for attending this.